Hey dudes and dudettes, it's me, E.H. Ivins, and this is another episode of The Radical Reset. Today, well, it's time for me to talk to you as a grandfather to his grandchildren or his children. Now, those of you who are watching me who are my peers, you'll get a kick out of this because this is all the shit that you wish you would have said to your own children and grandchildren. But in the politically correct world we live in of the woke and your grandchildren who have no respect for you because your children didn't slap the shit out of them when they should have, this is going to be cathartic. To those of you who are a millennial or later, millennial, Gen X, Gen Z, Gen this, Gen that, Gen go fuck yourself, all these different gens, those of you who were raised by parents who believed that every child is a winner, that you had to get an award for everything that you do, that where there were absolutely no boundaries, where you could call your mother a bitch, and all this other shit that children do today, seemingly without restriction, brace yourselves, we're going to have a discussion. Now, it's not going to be me like, why when I was a boy, we got slapped the shit out of with a switch down by the creek and, and all that kind of shit. We're not, no. And I've never laid a hand on a child, and I'm not going to start now. Part of raising children and part of just what the parents of the millennials and later should have been doing, I think, is to set some fucking boundaries, okay, and to point out that life is real. So this is going to be an episode about setting boundaries and understanding that life is real. And this, we're not going to reach a utopia, and we're going to have to work things out. And the whole basis of anti-politism, of course, is that people of disparate backgrounds, ideas, and ideologies can sit down without the pollution of power and the corruption and the crime of cash that's injected into the system and form a much better system of government than what we have today. But, part of this is growing the fuck up. None of this is ever going to happen unless we all grow the fuck up. And I don't know about you, but I am sick of it, in little ways. And before I even get into the meat and potatoes of today's episode, I want to have a shout out of shame to the Washington Redskins. Everybody loved, nobody viewed the Native Americans as this somehow quaint, cute little thing that we should all cherish until they were no longer a threat to the existence of everybody that was alive. In other words, the Indian Wars back in the 19th century were real. The Indian was not necessarily a sympathetic figure. There was plenty of, you can say, bury my heart at Wounded Knee and talk about that massacre, but the Indians did plenty of massacring on their own. And oh, by the way, of each other. I mean, ask the Cherokee how they feel about the Sioux up in the Dakotas. It's not like they were all in love with each other. And I hate to point out the obvious, but it's not like the Indians were these peaceful, pastoral, touchy-feely fairy people who lived out in the great American prairie. And, they lived there statically honoring each other's boundaries and territories and never touch each other's women and all that kind of shit. Anyway, fast forward, I'm getting lost in a past I should get lost into. The Washington Redskins are a bunch of fucking pussies right up there next to Dreyer's Ice Cream, who changed the name of Eskimo Pie. Now, I don't know about you, but I loved Eskimo pies. I'm never going to eat another one as long as I live after the Dreyer's changed the fucking... I'm not sure I'll buy another quart of Dreyer's ice cream. Did anyone think that the name Eskimo pie was somehow pejorative and disrespectful to Eskimos? Didn't you get the feeling the Eskimos were just the coolest people when they made that? What am I missing in that fucking story? And while we're at it, look, you know what? Since every fucking color seems to be, derogatory, I made a quick, just a short list of the teams whose names have to go. Chicago White Sox, Boston Red Sox, Cleveland Browns. All those colors are associated with things that are negative. They all have to go. We can maybe call them the Chicago fucking Green Sox. I'm just fucking tired of it. I don't know. Okay. Why, I'm feeling pretty goddamn cranky today, and I'm going to let you have it with both fucking barrels, children. Okay, so here we go. Some wisdom for the present. I'm going to discuss a few things with you today, just to give you a grown-up perspective, because first of all, we have the pundits, the political pundits. And those of you, and in our small group now, most of us are politically active. Pundits really are writing articles for each other. They're just talking to it. It's a great big wah, 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 back and forth. There's no real people injected. And oh, by the way, let me stop here again before I get into the body. One of the things that we're about to do that's different here on The Radical Reset is I'm going to start doing shows with another person, but not another famous person, another regular person, a person who hopefully disagrees with me on something elemental, and we're going to go back and forth and pretend that we're doing a real anti-politics discussion and solve some problems without the interference of politicians and demonstrate two things, and that is people with diverse viewpoints, when they're not corrupted by politics, can get along. And secondly, even when they can't, they can come to some happy middle ground they can all live with, and this could actually work. Now, I'm mostly interested, frankly, in talking to people who strenuously disagree with me, but I'll take whatever I can get. We have a few shows lined up anyway. That sounded so fucking desperate. That came out wrong. Listen, if you think you can string a sentence together, if you've always wanted to be on a YouTube broadcast, if you really want to give your political views an airing, you don't have to be polite, by the way. You can call me motherfucker. I don't care. We can have it, and we can laugh about it because we are grown-ups, right? Okay, so if you want to be a part of this, do me a favor. There's a link below to antipolitism.org. Go on there, fill out the form, put in your name. We'll be in touch briefly. We'll do some pre-interviewing. We'll chat. And if everything works out via either Skype or Zoom, we will do a show together, put it up here, and make each other infamous and famous at the same time. So please, do me a favor. If you've ever had like the vicarious thrill, and listen, as small as our show is at this point, if it turns out to be a shitty show, you're not going to embarrass yourself much because not that many people are going to see it. But God willing, one of these things will catch on, and someone will tell somebody else, and yada, yada, yada. And the next thing you know, it's a big deal, and anti-politism saves America. So again, I'd like to do a show with you. So link below, antipolitism.org. Be sure you do that. And, pick out an issue that you want to talk to me about or talk with me about, not to me, with me. And I'm not going to lecture you. We're going to have a really honest to God discussion and back and forth, and you can quote whatever you want, and you can wipe up the ground with me, and I'll change my mind if that's the case. And if you want to know, by the way, where I stand on a lot of things, pick up your free copy of A Radical Reset on Amazon Kindle. It's free if you're a Prime member for a Kindle download or to an electronic reader of some kind. It's a nominal charge if you want to pick up a paperback copy. Go through all those things. God knows I am not equivocating on any position I have. Find something that you absolutely fucking disdain that I talk about, and let's go at each other. Maybe we'll change each other's minds. Maybe we won't. But we will demonstrate that when you get rid of special interests and money, real people can have real discussions in a real way, and who knows, actually solve something, come up with something original and different and new, which would be a welcome change in the world that we live in. Okay, respect your elders, motherfucker. Here we go. Some wisdom for the present. And, obviously I made some notes. That's why I'm looking down, because, I'm 63 years old. I don't want to forget where I am. Okay, lesson number 1. Slur isn't argument. Okay, all you millennials, Gen Xers, Gen Zers, Gen Yers, well, if you're going to have a debate and discussion with somebody, and you're going to go back and forth with them, you need to learn some just basic decency, politeness, and learn how to make an argument without a slur. Because none of you have been told no ever in your fucking life, you don't seem to see the boundary between saying to somebody, here's the right way, ready, listen to what I'm saying. I understand and appreciate what you're saying. I have a different point of view. Here's why, and then enumerate the points and why, okay? And while truly understanding what they're saying. And if you really want to demonstrate that you give a shit about what somebody else says, and if you don't give a shit about what somebody else says, you're a sociopath, okay? To demonstrate that you're paying attention, that you're listening to what they're saying. Another good technique when you actually have a debate with somebody is to repeat back to them what their position is so that they understand that you understand what that is. So if I was debating, let's say, abortion with a pro-lifer, I'd say I understand and appreciate what you're saying. And I believe that what you're saying is from conception, that is a precious human life protected by God, and therefore abortion is murder of that fetus. I believe that's where you're coming from. And then I'd go into why I think that's really probably not the case, or why I think, where my position on abortions lie. Having said that, you can see I didn't disrespect the other person's position. I didn't demean it. I didn't look down my nose. And I didn't call you baby boomer fuck, or you idiot, or you Neanderthal, or whatever slur. We are down to in a Twitter and Facebook and Instagram world. We are down to the point where we do not debate, we slur, and we confuse the two. Saying that, repeating the talking point of the Republican or Democratic parties back at each other is a slur. That's not a debate. A debate is where you listen, hear, repeat back, appreciate, and then talk about the issues. Slur is not debate. Okay, did I make that clear? And it is the result of too many fucking awards and lazy parenting. If you're raising children now, any parents watching me now, and your children lose at something and they suck at it, you need to at some point turn to them and say, Bobby or Mary, you suck at that. It's just, it isn't going to be for you, and I realize that in TV movies, the kid who couldn't throw the baseball ends up being Hank Aaron, but in reality, this is not the case. And you need to prepare children for what life really is and stop with the lack of boundaries, because they grow up into entitled little brats who don't understand the difference between slur and discussion. 2, freedom begins with the freedom not to act. Now, there's a classic conundrum that's often presented. I'm not sure what the terminology for this is, but a man's walking down the beach, he's looking out into the lake. In the lake, he sees someone drowning. Does he have an obligation? Can there be a law to force him to go out and save that person drowning? And the answer is, for there to be true freedom, that answer has to be no. Freedom begins with the freedom not to act. Now, I understand that every decent person hearing my voice, including myself, if I saw somebody out in the lake drowning and flopping around, the very first thing I would do is kick off my shoes as I was running into the surf, peeling off my shirt, and go in there and save them, because that is what a decent person would attempt to do. But you see, the government, the issue is not whether that's the decent thing to do. The issue is not whether it's the decent thing to run into the surf and save the drowning person. And of course, the odds that any of us are going to be walking down the beach and staring out into the surf and seeing a drowning person are very slim. But we must protect the rights of an individual not to act if that is their choice, and not make it wrong. Because for the government, the minute the government begins to coerce behavior, you'll see where I'm going with this in a minute, it does it at gunpoint. In other words, ultimately, we cannot say no to the government, because in the end, they will come with a gun and either march us off to prison, where I have been, or shoot us, okay? Which no one else can do. You cannot coerce somebody to your point of view with a gun unless you are the government. So in the case of freedom, you must have the freedom not to act. Now, in this woke culture we're living in, we're getting to the point where, at least in popular culture, we're making it illegal not to give voice to things that we just don't want to do because we have a personal choice. In other words, and to use the most obvious example, if you choose not to use a neutral gender pronoun for the cisgender trans people, that's your choice. You cannot be coerced. And yet there are people in laws all over the country, and people every day trying to form laws to make the government coerce people to do things the way they want to do it. And the fact of the matter is, it's kind of like motorcycle helmet laws. There should never be motorcycle helmet laws, because it doesn't affect the third person whether you wear a helmet or not. It's a matter of personal choice. Now, you can say that if you don't wear the helmet, you're going to go all over the pavement and splatter your brains and end up being at best, a vegetable and probably dead and blah, blah, blah. But unless you're dealing with somebody who's brain dead, they know that. This is a personal choice issue. Freedom is also the freedom not to act. And if the government coerces, as most states do, people to wear motorcycle helmets, and if you accept that, you are like going as a lamb to slaughter. Those kind of laws, any law that repeals an individual's ability to do what they want to do, including wearing a helmet on a motorcycle or injecting heroin into their veins, as long as it doesn't involve anyone else, as long as they're not bending over to inject heroin into the veins of their child, then it cannot be coerced by the government what you can or cannot do. I get pretty vociferous when I talk about that. So the freedom not to act is an important, just like the freedom to be stupid. I mean, I understand that Mayor Bloomberg, when he was mayor of New York, made, what do they call those great big giant drink? Big gulps illegal. But, first of all anyone's going to do is buy two smaller gulps than one big gulp, or three, or whatever the fuck it is. They're going to pay more money out of their pocket because, people are going to buy their big gulps anyway. And who the fuck is he to say, okay, first of all, I don't like soda pop because I don't like fizzies. I don't like bubbles. I'm one of those weird people that I'll never get drunk on champagne because I can't stand the feeling of bubbles in my mouth. But and beer, to me, tastes like what urine would taste like if it was carbonated. But having said that, it is certainly your right to do whatever you want with yourself. And the freedom to be stupid is a big part of that. If you want to, walk out into shark-infested waters and swim around, that's your fucking business. And that's why, by the way, suicide should be legal. And do not conflate what I'm saying. Here's where slur and argument, if I said that in front of a room full of people and I said suicide should be legal, Okay, everybody, not everybody, but a lot of the woke would go, oh my God, look at the suicide rate with transgender children, and look at the suicide rate among our young, and our suicide rate among the generations, and all you millennials and later, you're offing yourselves left and right. Look, by saying that suicide should be legal, I'm not saying, by the way, that suicide is good or that offing you is good, although in some cases there are some people who I wish would kill themselves, and I'm being totally realistic when I tell you that. But that aside, the vast majority of people, obviously, I think suicide's a bad thing. Obviously, I am not advocating the suicide of the young, but you're doing it to yourself. You're doing it to yourself. We're not going to put aside children. Don't answer me, well, then let's make it illegal for children. No one's going to prosecute a child for trying to kill themselves. The current law, yes or no? That's a whole different subject. That's the result of parents who didn't understand that there's no difference between quality and quantity time and did not imbue their children with enough self-image that they were ready to face the fucking world and not get depressed over every goddamn thing that comes down the pike and get to the point where they're so hopeless that they want to kill themselves. But look, if you get to be an adult and you want to kill yourself, kill yourself. I mean, that is the essence of freedom. Victimless crime, except for the harming of yourself, cannot be a crime. The state I know how gross that sounds, but you must stop the coercion of the state into the rights to use your own body. That's where it all begins. And we give up a little bit here, a big gulp here and a Slurpee there and a cigarette here. Anti-smoking laws. There's not a shred of actual scientific evidence exists that secondhand smoke is anything but unpleasant. And I am not a cigarette smoker or a cigar smoker, by the way. That leaves pot, by the way, in case you're wondering what I do smoke. And, secondhand smoke is unpleasant, unless you're hotboxing the pot in the car out in the parking lot before a movie, in which case it is absolutely delightful. But cigarette secondhand smoke, it's disgusting. It covers your clothes. I won't date a smoker, frankly. I won't kitchen ashtray. But if a grown adult woman, for example, wants to smoke cigarettes and decides it's not important whether I want to date her or not, she's probably right. I mean, who are we to tell? And if a restaurant owner wants to have a smoking bar, well, then the people that don't want to be around smoking don't have to go there. Who is the fucking state? These are the little encroachments. That poor guy that was killed in New York City selling Lucy cigarettes. I forget his name. It wasn't George Floyd, God rest his soul. It was the other one where the poor guy was Ahmaud Arbery or something like that. He was being arrested, the guy with the taser, over selling Lucy's. Well, look, why is he even selling Lucy's? He's selling Lucy's because, again, Mayor Bloomberg, thank God he's not running for president, introduced taxes on cigarette sales in New York City to the point where the taxes are so onerous that people, what they do is they go to other states where those taxes don't exist, they buy the cigarettes and sell them loose. In other words, by making a law against something that's ridiculous, that should be a personal choice, the mayor produced the predictable outcome, which is a black market, just the same way the drug cartels only exist because drugs are illegal. If drugs were legal, we could treat them as the health problem that they are, not a criminal problem, and the cartels go away, and so do the gangs, and so does all the violence. Well, this poor man selling Lucy's would have never been selling Lucy's if the state sees. You see how what looks like, well, we're doing it for everyone's own good, ended up resulting in the death. It's not so much the police officers that killed that man. It was that stupid fucking law that created a black market for loose cigarettes that would have never existed if the government didn't try to enforce the morality and what's good or bad between you and me at fucking gunpoint. Okay, so grow up. The government isn't going to provide for you, millennials and later, and be real about that. And those of my generation, by the way, that still believe in that bullshit and that socialist crap and think there's some kind of light version and Bernie Sanders and all the rest of them, engage me. Do me a favor. Make sure that you go to antipoliticism.org. Let's have a respectful debate on why you still believe this after a lifetime of our length seeing socialism fail and tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions, die. Okay, so anyway, I'd love to have that discussion, that respectful discussion. I'll listen to what you have to say. I have good friends on Facebook all the time, and from the far left, we go back and forth. I'd love to have that face-to-face. Anyway, okay. Malthus, and this is a little obscure, but I'm going to explain it to you. Malthus plus Marx equals environmentalism. In other words, John Malthus was a 19th century philosopher who posited that the world would run out of resources, there would be too many people, and then too much drag on the resources, and we would all end up in starvation. Therefore, we should all go back to a simpler life of horse and buggy. And I'm simplifying a longer discussion, but he's basically believed in turning back all progress. And there are people that still follow him today called Malthusians. Okay, whenever you think that progress is a bad thing, you are a Malthusian. And we all know who Karl Marx is. Well, when you add Malthus plus Marx, you get environmentalism, the new religion. Look, climate change is real, but the facts are, and this is the fact, the temperature of the planet has raised 0.9 degrees between 1900 and today. Now, I'm not saying that that couldn't lead, and when I look at all the charts and I see all the projections, which is all they are, projections, but there are other problems that are more critical to us right now than freaking out over the fucking climate. It's not that the climate isn't real, and it's not that environmentalism isn't important, it's that we've lost all perspective of what's real and important when we have these discussions and it turns to slur versus debate. Okay, so in other words, I would say that the poverty of children, poverty kills far more children every year than climate change. I mean, it's not even a fucking horse race. Poverty kills more people each year of all ages than climate change. Poverty kills, well, tens of millions of people every year and people are dying of diseases, particularly in Africa, that in the rest of the world are gone. And there are bigger problems, is what I'm telling you. We have, as humanity, bigger fish to fry than environmentalism. And besides, we know what the answer is to environmentalism and to the environment, to climate change. And if it weren't for the religion that environmentalism has become, we would openly say it. We've got to build nuclear power plants everywhere. The whole world has to go nuclear. If the world goes nuclear, we have an inexhaustible power supply that ultimately can be free. Nuclear power is unlimited and inexhaustible. It's time for us to tame that dragon, which, by the way, other countries already have, like France, and become 100% nuclear. And then we have a clean environment and we have more power we know what to do with, because the environment and turning the clock back and living a simpler life sounds great until you're dying in your mid-30s of gum disease. Okay, and you're dying of tuberculosis, and you're dying of polio, and you're dying of all the things that civilization brings. And it comes as a result, by the way, of fossil fuels. It is not a coincidence that how much oil was there in the world prior to 1850? None. Oil was discovered in 1858. Okay, and at least in this country, and wasn't widely used as power until the turn of the century. And because of the enormous power unleashed by fossil fuels, we went from the Wright brothers to where we're going to have commercially viable trips into outer space on Elon Musk's and the Virgin guy. What's his name? I can see his face. Richard Branson. These guys are running commercial flights to space, and look at the short period of time versus the expanse, the thousands, the roughly 100,000 years that could be as many as 250,000 years. All of you ultra-religious, please do not engage me on creationism. That's another discussion for another day. Human beings have been on the planet at least 100,000 years, probably as much as 250,000 years. And by the way, or at least some hominid that's a precursor of ours, and I don't want to debate that with you, but let's just call it 100,000 years. Why is it the last 100 years, almost all the technological development from not knowing what a bacteria is to now being able and on the brink of really unlocking the genetic code to aging and living forever? How did all this happen? Fossil fuels. Fossil fuels. Don't fucking kid yourself. Something has to power that computer. Something has to power that railroad. Something has to deliver those goods and services. Something has to move everything so that everybody can eat. Something has to power the lights. Something has to power the computers. Fossil fuels. How do we fix that and fix the climate at the same time? If we're rational and we have a discussion, we don't call the other side stupid or ignorant, we build nuclear power plants. A blind man could see it. A blind man could see it. And we can have a discussion about that. In fact, I'll debate anybody watching now who wants to. But in the meantime, let's not turn it into a religion where if you dare to say that, Jesus isn't God, you're going to burn in hell for eternity. Well, in climatism and environmentalism, if you dare say that climate is not the number one thing that's going to kill everybody in 12 years, you're a fucking heretic. Well, that's not going to win any arguments among the rational. And this is part of growing up. And so it's particularly this environmentalism religion is extremely big among the millennials, the Gen Xers, and later, partially because I think they were raised without any other what's the word I'm looking for? Spiritual background or idea or, philosophy beyond themselves, in whatever form that might take, and partially because they weren't spanked and didn't have any, I told you I don't strike children, but children need boundaries, man. And those of you who are raised without them, it's time to force yourself into it. By the way, you know how I did it since I was raised by a pedophile and a mother that basically was a waste of time? I joined the Navy. I knew I needed boundaries. And the military did it for me. We all need our boundaries. We all need to be slapped around every now and then. We all need to be told we don't get our way. But anyway, environmentalism, give me a break. And those of you who think that, by the way back in the day when people ate naturally and all that kind of, they were dropping dead in their 30s and 40s. Remember that. God forbid you get cancer today. Look me in the eye and tell me you're not going to go get chemotherapy, radiation, and surgery as prescribed by the cancer center. Now, look, you want to go to get, pins stuck in yourself, and you want to believe in all kinds of, fairy tales, that's fine. And maybe cancer will kill you anyway, but your best shot is science. And we can have that discussion too. Another subject we could agree to disagree on and engage on. I'd be more than happy to debate science versus, alternative medicine and other things. It's an interesting discussion. And without the condescension of holding each other as stupid because we don't agree with each other, we could actually talk like grown-ups. Okay, which brings us to the next point. Diversity. I'm getting tired of fucking diversity. I'm getting tired of multiculturalism. Diversity is a code word for factionalism. Now look, and that's going to destroy the country. I'm telling you, we are in a very dangerous situation. We're in a very dangerous situation. We're in a very dangerous situation in our country right now because we are factionalizing. People are identifying themselves within some spectrum of diversity. Then once they find where they fall in that spectrum, they attach themselves to it, like, like white knuckling it, like that's going to be who they are forever. And then that's how they must think. And that's the line they must follow. And we're tearing our culture apart. Look, I said it in an earlier podcast. I'll say it again. I'm going to say it now. I've said it in a blog. I've said it before. I've said it lots of times. European culture is superior historically to other cultures. Now, I know that's a very subjective judgment, and I know there's pretty pictures that are painted by other places and statues and writing and beautiful poems and everything else, but I'm talking about in the progression of the well-being of the individual. Western European culture as transplanted to the United States is superior to Asian culture, African culture, sub-Asian culture, Slavic culture, you name the culture, Western European culture that has been transplanted into the United States and then through that into Canada in particular, and all the countries of particularly the British Commonwealth, is the superior culture in terms of its ability through its economic system, which is capitalism. And the more free the market is, the more prosperous the people are. And every statistic that's ever been collected agrees with that. We need to reignite the idea of a melting pot. In other words, when you come to this country, when my grandfather came to this country in the early 1900s, fleeing the Russian Revolution as a former Russian Jew, he didn't ever get to be a Soviet Jew, thank God, because he knew time to get the fuck out of there while he could. Ended up in Ellis Island, New York, didn't speak word fucking one of English. There were no bilingual signs for Russian speakers and Yiddish speakers. He had to learn how to speak English. He had to educate himself. He had to start his own company. He ended up being a success. And there are thousands like him. I'm not going to go into his whole story, but there are thousands, if not millions, of stories like that, not just of Jews, but of Italians and of Germans and Greeks and and Africans that have come since and Vietnamese that came after the fall of Saigon and on and on and on, of minority groups that came to the United States, were not allowed to factionalize, were told to assimilate and did. Learn to speak English, assimilate into the culture, not to be proud of who you are. In other words, across the street from where I live is a restaurant called Pho 32, Pho 32. It's Vietnamese soup. If you've never had pho, you have not lived. I love pho. And the people that run it, they're a Vietnamese family, and it's terrific, and they make a great broth. And anyway, I don't want to digress into that. But having said that, they're Americans. Now, they happen to own a Vietnamese restaurant, just like some Chinese Americans own Chinese restaurants, some Mexican Americans own Chinese restaurants. The great thing is we adopt other cultures, we adapt other cultures, we assimilate other cultures, and that's the key word. We assimilate them, we appreciate them, we embrace them, we share their food. Indian food, love it. One of the reasons I go to Trader Joe's is they have great frozen Indian entrees. The point is, we don't have to reject that there's diversity in people. We have to stop grabbing diversity because in its current woke form, that means factionalism. There should be no bilingualism, not even for Spanish. When people come here from other countries, they should come here and learn to speak English and then become part of the culture, part of the American culture, which is based on European values. We should throw out this bullshit 1619 rewrite of history. It was all based on slavery, bullshit nonsense the New York Times is behind. It's nonsense. We should teach in our schools, which ought to be, frankly, privatized, that it was a glorious history in Western Europe, a glorious culture that came to the United States, a glorious culture that produced the unbelievable engine of prosperity that has lifted more people out of poverty than anything else in history, period, not to mention an unbelievably diverse population. And let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater because a bunch of spoiled brats think that they know better. Okay, so there you go. Spoiled brats. I just called people watching me spoiled. You're not all spoiled brats. Look, my children are all millennials and later. Here's the thing. I adore you guys, but I look around, I have two eyes. I don't need a study to tell me that some of you kids need a spanking. Maybe, what's the right word I'm looking for? A metaphorical spanking, an allegorical spanking, I don't know, but a spanking and some boundaries. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about your benefit and going forward, you young people. College used to be a place where kids living the American dream of all races and genders obviously would go and then argue things out. And diversity of opinion was respected and supported. And college, for the last 50 years has been kind of left of center, but not ridiculous. And you could find, on-campus Republican organizations and conservative organizations and Young Americans for Liberty and libertarian organizations, so on and so forth. But more and more, this is becoming destroyed by college. And one of the things as a result of COVID might be for us to, at this point, especially you parents of kids going to college, ask yourself, is this money well spent? Why are we spending money? Why are we supporting an infrastructure for a system that teaches our kids a version of our culture that is poisonous, self-destructive, and will lead to our doom? Why are we allowing colleges to become somehow the propagators of dictatorial thought? That you have to be woke, that you have to conform, that you have to give in, that you have to bend to the demands of the truly poorly thought out and sometimes just plain stupid. So instead, might it be better, instead of wasting $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a year, sending your kids to school, taking student loans, saving up money for years and years and years, begging your parents, taking second mortgages, all that other kind of good shit. Or those of you who are trying to work your way through just encumbering loans that you may never be able to pay back. And now if there's another pandemic, if life has taught us anything, is you might be grotesquely overpaying for nothing. Maybe the answer isn't college at all. Maybe out there are entrepreneurs right now, and I know there are, that's why I'm saying this. Job certification. Google, I read the other day, has a program where they're going to train 100,000 people in job certification positions with Google, great paying, great jobs that you don't need college for, that pay college level. And I believe that's going to be the wave of the future. I think college, by allowing the Gen Xers and the Gen Zers and the Millennials and all that other stuff to go off the rails and to stifle debate, is making increasingly the mainstream of people, the people that elected Donald Trump, frankly, and I didn't elect Donald Trump, but there's tens of millions who are so offended by this and so offended at the idea. And there's like no, give me an inch, take a mile. It's, you give in a little bit and then they want a little more and a little more and a little more. Why are we paying $100,000 for this shit? Why are people going into six-figure debt, sometimes seven-figure debt? Why not just pick something you're interested in, find the job that you like, and get job certified, and skip the whole fucking process and go right to and make the big bucks, live happily ever after. And I got to believe that's the wave of the future. And I'll bet you, that there are going to be companies that are going to respond to this in the education establishment, and there's going to be screaming and yelling, and good. Anyway, so that's where I'm going to leave it today. So we've covered. Let's see, what did we cover? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6 different fun stuff, plus renaming the Washington Redskins. By the way, my suggestion for the name, given that they are absolute pansy pussies, is the Washington Foreskins. Okay, that's it. Click on the subscribe button. Click on the notification button. Make sure to go to antipolitism.org, submit some information, join the movement. Come with me. Let us save America. Let us restore debate. Let us restore discussion. Let us restore maturity. Let us restore Western culture. Let us restore all the things that made this country great. Let's come together, not factionalize. Let's talk, not yell. Let's discuss, not slur. And let's stop playing politics. Fuck politics. Get politics out of our lines. Out of our lines? We're not doing cocaine. Out of our lives. Join antipolitism.org. Pick up your free copy of A Radical Reset on Amazon Kindle. It's free for Prime members. A small charge if you'd like a paperback copy instead. And that's it for today. And until next time, this is E.H. Ivins signing off.